In this video, we're going to take a look at the Bevel and Emboss layer style effect. Now, I do want to give you a heads up. I will be breaking the Bevel and Emboss up into two videos, one over the primary settings, and then we'll do a separate video over the special features of contour and texture. Now, for this example, I have a background of this kind of dark brown with blue, and the reason I set the stick figure to blue and made a dark brown background is because some of these bevel and settings extend out into the edges, kind of like the outside of your layer. And so having a nice kind of mid-tone to darkish background will really help those stand out so you can see what's going on. So without any further ado, let's double click on the layer itself, and that will bring up our layer style window, and I'll go ahead and switch on Bevel and Emboss. Now at this resolution it may be a little tricky to see what's going on, but we do have a little bit of a highlight around the upper edges of our shape and a little bit of shading underneath, even at just the defaults. To help you really see that, to really kind of make it pop out at you, I'm going to take the size slider and kick that up just a little bit. Now let's take a look at the settings we have from top to bottom. We have two groups. We have the structure group and the shading group. In the structure group, you have settings that are going to control the shape of the bevel itself. And then in shading, we have how light is going to play across the surface. So starting with structure, at the very top, we have a drop-down that allows us to control the style of our bevel. By default, this is set to inner bevel, which gives you what you see here. The bevel effect takes place within the shape of your layer. So you can see in this case it makes the paint on that layer look kind of like a raised surface, kind of like puff paint, if you will, or something that has a little bit of thickness. If we switch this to outer bevel, what we get is the result of the bevel taking place on the outside edge of our layer. So you can see it looks kind of like the background has been raised up and that the blue itself is a flattened surface on the very top. So it's still like it's kind of popping out at you, but you get kind of a transition where we go up and then we flatten off when we get to the area of color. We have a couple of others as well. We have Emboss. What this is going to do is cause the transition of the bevel to take place starting at the background or starting on the outer edge of your shape and then working its way in. A really interesting way to remember this is that outer bevel takes place outside your shape. Inner bevel puts that bevel transition inside your shape. And then Emboss takes that bevel transition and centers it up on the edge of your shape. So some of the bevel takes place on the background, and then the rest of the bevel takes place inside the layer itself. And it gives you that look like when you have like a stamped metal lunchbox where, you know, the bevel itself or the embossing has taken place and then somebody has painted and the two surfaces don't exactly align perfectly. It's a very cool effect. We have some special ones as well. We have Pillow Emboss, and this will cause the background or the area outside your layer to look like it's been indented, while the pixels of the layer itself, the solid pixels that have some opacity, look like they're coming back up. So it looks like a cookie cutter-like shape has been used to kind of punch into the overall surface of your document. And then finally, we have Stroke Emboss, which by default is going to look like it's doing nothing at all. But if we switch on Stroke at the very bottom of our layer style window and increase the size, what that's doing is it's saying that we're only going to see a bevel effect wherever there is a stroke applied to our object. So if you set this to Stroke Emboss, you won't see the result until you switch on a stroke as well. For the purposes of our demonstration, I'm going to leave this set to inner bevel. Let's go ahead and move down to some of our other drop-downs as well. Next, we have Technique. This allows you to control kind of how the bevel is going to be calculated. The default is Smooth. We also have Chisel Hard and Chisel Soft. Chisel Hard is going to give you a flat surface at the base and a flat surface at top, and then a very harsh transition in between the two. Admittedly, this tends to look a lot better on vector-based shape as opposed to pixel-based shapes because you get this kind of funny jaggedy edge. Just to kind of show that off, though, I'm going to click OK, and let's grab our Type tool. And I currently have Palatino Linotype set up there, so I'm just going to grab that. That'll work, and I'll make my text color, we'll just say a similar shade of blue for now. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I'll make a capital Z because it's a great letter. And we'll just really crank up the size. Now I'm doing that by taking the text tool's little size area, and right there on the size icon you can just click and drag and that'll make that nice and big. Now if I move this Z a little bit further into my document, I'm going to take the Bevel and Emboss effect. And here's just kind of a neat trick I'll just kind of throw your way. like everything else inside the layers panel, we can alt drag this and make a copy of it on our existing layer. And here you can see that that chisel hard effect looks a lot better on the vector shape of our text than it does over here on our hand-drawn surface. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. I'll go ahead and throw away my Z, and we'll jump back into the settings for our bevel and emboss. So there's Chisel Hard, and then we have Chisel Soft as well, which is very similar. It just has a softened effect on the outside. So play with these and see which one works best for your particular situation. Now, down from here, we have depth. Let me go ahead and set this back over to smooth for now. Depth controls how dramatically that bevel is going to be taking place. So a low depth looks like the surface doesn't really raise up very far. A really high depth looks like the surface actually has a much higher elevation once you get to the center. So you can tweak that to find just the right combination for what you're working on. Next, you can control the direction of the bevel. Does it come up off the page, or does it go down into the surface? You have to be a little careful with this, though, because there is kind of an optical illusion involved in that if you're not careful, it will look just like the lighting has been reversed. That we have just a little bit more light coming up from the bottom now, and the shading is coming in at the top. It's all just a matter of optical illusions, though, so if there are other parts of your document which can suggest that this has been indented into the surface, that will probably help the eye from getting too terribly confused. Next we have size, which we've already played with. This just controls how far into or out of the surface the bevel extends based on the type of bevel you're doing. And you have soften as well. To really show off soften, I'm going to switch over to Chisel Soft. And then as I increase the softening value, you'll see that that's taking away some of those anomalies. Now we do lose kind of the hardened factor that we get at the very end of that. But if we don't like seeing some of those jaggies, we can really crank that up and make those jaggies go away. Alright, so that takes care of the structure area. Now, I had previously mentioned I was going to break this up into 2 videos, but I guess to keep things nice and concise, I will in fact break it up into 3. So in the next video, we'll take a look at the shading group of Bevel and Emboss, and then after that we'll move on to contour and texture. So that'll wrap things up for this video. Thanks a lot.